Hi,
Hi
Pete.
everyone, good afternoon. Thank you for joining us at 3 p.m. right now in all over the world, and it's basically the 50 years of Earth Day. And right now we are going to talk about a very relevant topic. I mean, it's not just environmentalism that we're talking about, it's also sustainability and the fact that we're dealing with a crisis that is affecting not just our environment but humanity. And the way that humanity deals with this crisis could also impact our environment. So I guess we'll start off with introductions. We have three very important guests today who can share a lot of insights on our topic. So first off, we have Colleen Salamat from Oceana. She's the campaign associate for their campaign to end single-use plastic. We also have Monique Obligacion, who is the founder of the online community Manila Grows Food, which is all about, of course, sourcing food from your own backyard and being self-reliant on your food. But she's also the administrator for Buhay Zero Waste, which advocates for low impact living. We also have with us Maya Ang C, who is also from Buhay Zero Waste, and she's also an assistant professor at DLSU, the Department of De La Salle University, but specifically the College of Education. So everyone, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much for being part of this video conference, and hopefully we get a lot of insights going on how we can reduce our impact despite the calamity, the crisis unfolding all over the world. So I guess we can start off with some some major overarching questions that are compounding the situation, or basically what we're curious about, given that there's so much disinfection, so much use of plastics with this pandemic. Obviously, human health is a priority here, and a lot of people, we use plastic because it's safer. People think that it's we can dispose of it so we can manage more the virus, the spread of the virus and contamination. So my first question is, what are the challenges in managing waste during this pandemic, especially given that human health, or life, is a priority right now?
Okay, I'll start. Um, in terms of household, we do realize, for example, we have to go out in masks. Okay. Um, and these are all single-use items. You use it once, you go to the grocery, and then you have to throw it out. So the compromise there is, number one, if you have a reusable cloth mask, why not use that? Okay? It's not as if when we go out, we still practice social distancing. We're not exposing ourselves to symptomatic patients. We're not exposing ourselves to, we try and stay away from the people around us. So we distance ourselves. So we do have that layer of protection already of distance, so we can use reusable masks instead of the disposable ones. So that also solves the problem of disposal of hazardous waste from the home. Because even from the home, if you do have disposable masks, you need to separate the container when you hand this over to your garbage collector. They have to know that they're handling infectious waste, right? Ideally, if you do have these, we do recommend bilad. Ibilad muna para at least mas less danger for the person who will collect your waste, diba? So that's one. And then there are a lot of other alternatives for regular household waste. Maybe we can get to that later.
Okay. Maya, saw you talked about household waste and what individuals, like private citizens, can do, especially when we just use reusable instead of disposable. How about in the health sector? We know that doctors, they use these big suits, these masks. How are they? To what extent are they reusable?
cannot. So I'm volunteering right now with the town's foundation. It procures and supplies medical PPE supplies for medical for hospitals. Cannot. Everything
Mm.
is really disposable. When you're talking of infections, life and death, no. You just have to really steel yourself against the single-use waste. I could just imagine how much. But there is no choice on that end. And no, we don't beat ourselves up about it because, I'm sorry, but waste does not trump life.
Mhm.
Any other insights on how we can manage waste, especially during this time? Like maybe, obviously, hospitals, doctors, we shouldn't put the burden on them. But how about things like when we go to the market? Right now, that's one of the things we're the only things we're allowed to do. Right, go to the market, pick up pick up food for our loved ones. I mean, is there any way we can also minimize our waste when we do these things?
In terms of waste management, for me, the best way for us to manage waste is to not produce waste in the first place. That way, we won't have stuff to manage. And this is the whole concept of zero waste, wherein you follow a set of principles. You have this mentality wherein you prevent waste from even happening in the first place. So just to give context for viewers or for participants in the webinar who are not familiar with this, zero waste is basically um, us having this mentality where no trash is sent to landfills or the ocean, etc. Because um, us kasi like we've been programmed since childhood that like for as long as you throw your trash properly, which is like the trash can usually, um, you're already doing great. You're like a proper upstanding citizen. But where does that all go once that trash from there is taken from your homes? It doesn't go away. It just gets relocated either to a landfill or, most of the time the ocean because we're an archipelago anyway and like pag nabagyo, like yon. Um,
Mhm.
so basically, in zero waste, we practice refuse, reduce, reuse, recycle, and rot. Some of the participants have probably heard of this before. Those who haven't, you can look this up online. Zero waste, and basically, if we follow these principles, um, this will diminish, if not eliminate, the waste that we produce at home completely. I'm saying this from experience in that my partner and I, at home, we live in a condo. We're smack in the middle of the business district, so we also don't have access to fresh things. But um, our household does not have any trash cans and does not send waste to landfills. So it's possible, it's doable in the city. Um, but yeah, zero waste is a personal practice. Everybody has their own way, and it's a journey to get there. It's not really like it doesn't really end. So there's always a way to make things better, to reduce the stuff that you consume or the stuff that you dispose of. And if we don't have trash in the first place leaving our homes, then there won't be anything to manage anymore. It's easy. Like my partner and I, even pandemic or no, the mentality that doesn't change. We've always just purchased essentials. So like now, 'di ba, essentials lang yung these are the only things that we can buy, that we can move around the city, or that we can procure for ourselves, for our families. This is something that my partner and I have been practicing like before pa, or um, that's kunyari, like under refuse. So refuse anything that's not essential, refuse using things that you don't really need, especially now that we don't go out anymore. I mean, you don't need to use conditioner, all these things that we normally buy. Um, you asked earlier, like about going to the grocery. What happens then? Like, what do you buy? Because everything is in packaging, and that's actually the biggest challenge in terms of waste because you can't eat out. There's no dining in anymore. Everything is like takeout mentality. No, a lot of people don't have access to public markets where you can bring your own containers and then they can just put whatever in, which is normally what we would do, without the pandemic. But now we don't have access to these things, so we're forced to go to the supermarket. But at the supermarket, for example, um, there still are things that are package free. Like sometimes supermarkets have, potatoes. Sometimes there's like rice, coffee that you can get package free. And a lot of people, because of the pandemic, are more averse, I think, to package free stuff. Like a lot of people now prefer to buy stuff that's, in plastic because most people think that this is safer. Now, I'm not an authority when it comes to like health or, I'm not a doctor or anything like that. So do what works for you. I know a lot of people will still choose to buy whatever's in plastic because they deem that that's safer. But from personal experience, I'll just tell you guys what I do. I choose the ones that don't come in plastic because if I buy, for example, potatoes or cucumbers that aren't in plastic, when I wash those at home, which I mean, we all wash our veggies before we eat them, right? At least the stuff gets washed off. And then you cook the vegetables. I mean, that's supposed to kill the virus, right? So even if it does have anything on it, it's something that you actually get rid of. However, if I buy something that's in plastic, I'll buy carrots in plastic. I take the plastic off at home, and then where do I put that? If it's got infectious stuff on it, then it's just gonna sit in my home for X number of days until I don't know until the garbage man picks it up, and then he probably gets infected. I would prefer to just get something that I can wash, I can cook, or I can compost that won't. I don't know, but again, that's just me. So that's me in terms of like refusing things in packaging. Um, a lot of people say like, yeah, but how do you cook? How do you meal plan? Well, I'll just buy whatever I see that's package free, and then I'll just Google whatever recipes are available for these ingredients. Or like there's a website called supercook.com. It's also an app where you can plug in whatever ingredients you have, even if it's just one ingredient like chickpeas or something. And it'll give you all the possible things that you can make with it with just the ingredients you have. What else? We keep talking about waste kasi in terms of waste that actually goes to landfills, tangible waste like plastic. Everybody thinks plastic when we think basura, but it's not. Waste is a lot more than just plastic, which is why when we translate it to Tagalog, it's walang sayang, not like walang plastic. So when we practice zero waste, there are a lot of other ways that we can reduce waste that's not just plastic. For example, at home, in terms of like our utilities, like our electrical consumption, our water consumption. Um, for example, if we unplug all of the appliances that we have at home that we don't use, like phone chargers, electric fans, microwave ovens, we will be saving a lot of um, energy. There is such a thing as it's called vampire energy, and that's basically our electrical appliances consuming things even if they're not turned on. Even if, especially if they're appliances that have the standby mode. So usually like TV sets, desktop computers, microwave ovens. Let's use the microwave oven as an example. Your microwave oven, especially if it's digital and it has that clock running, you actually consume more electricity to have that clock running versus you heating like a plate of food once per day. So that's carbon emissions and fuel and everything that
Yeah, that's true.
waste.
Actually, I can imagine with all the people in their house right now, like everyone's doing Netflix, everyone's, going
Yep.
on their laptops and checking their phones. So I can imagine just the consumption of electricity must be at its all-time high, especially now it's summer, but it's hot, people have their air
Yeah.
conditioning on the whole time. So yeah, that's a really good point. Like how do we minimize our electric consumption? And I also want to pick up on something you said earlier, Monique, when you talked about um companies or private establishments that actually sell things without much packaging, or at least without single-use plastic packaging. So I want to jump to Colleen. Colleen, you're in the campaign to limit single-use plastics. Have you noticed any good practices in businesses or restaurants, online delivery services where they actually advocate and actually implement low use of single-use plastics, or even no packaging at all?
Yes, there's actually lots of small micro enterprises doing that already, especially in the metro. Actually, in Cebu also, they're starting, and it's actually it's very welcoming for us entrepreneurs and the people who are very aware of what's happening with the environment. And I'd like to add also that what you said earlier na parang single-use plastics is safer, ganyan. But disposables aren't actually safer. And medical experts said that you can clean the virus with soap and hot water. Actually, recently, there's a scientific consensus statement stating that there's over 12,000 chemicals present in single-use plastics, and those chemicals actually migrate to food. Kasi, di ba, for example, chips or bread, it's super close to the plastic, so the tendency is it gets to our bread and we actually consume it. So the chemicals are actually very harmful. And it's the single-use plastics is more exposed to the virus because of the transport, the process of until you consume it, until you consume it.
Okay.
Just to clarify, what I meant earlier about the like single-use plastics, it's most people, I think it's a misconception that they think it's safer if it's wrapped in plastic. But like yun, ako, I would refuse anything that's wrapped in plastic any day, not just because of the the implications in terms of my waste output, but also because yun nga, the virus just sits on the stuff and then
Yeah.
it can't really like it's an extra thing to I don't know clean, disinfect, and it doesn't work for me.
Mm. So actually, another concern that is coming out now, right? When we dispose of our waste that could be infected, we know that garbage collectors are some of the frontliners who don't really get acknowledged during this pandemic, but they're actually facing a lot of danger. Diba? They collect our waste, and people naman, iba-iba yung how we discard our waste. It's not a standard thing. A lot of people don't know how to throw their waste properly. So for all our participants in this webinar, can you give concrete ways we can dispose of our trash, whatever trash we have? Of course, we try to minimize, but whatever trash we have. And what are ways we can protect the garbage collectors from getting the disease from the trash we throw?
The advice right now is if you have hazardous waste, single-use mask or gloves, you put that in transparent containers so that the garbage collector actually knows what it is, right? Um, I don't think we can answer on how to dispose of other waste because like I have a family of four. We're a family of four plus two dogs. I think we throw out one small paper bag once every 3 months. So pandemic or no, it's really we try not to produce waste at all. No, so um, there are a lot. One very quick way of reducing and refusing things and replacing single use, go back and think of what did your lola and your lolo use before single use. No, so before toilet paper, what did they use? They used tabo and bimpo to wipe, right? um, Before packaging, what did they use? Before any of those, like cotton balls. Before cotton balls and before this, your lolo and your lola just used plain cloth, right? And these are things that you already have in your house. You have old shirts that you never use, cut them up, you have instant towels, right? Um, Refusing, part of the 5 R's, the first one is to refuse. So it's not as if, okay, I want to move into a zero waste lifestyle, I want to have reusable items. It doesn't mean you buy, because that's also increasing your consumption. You find things in your house and use all of that, right? So that's how so my children, for example, will always ask their grandmother, like, Lola, when you were a kid, what did you do when you don't have this? And that's how they get their tips on the zero waste alternatives. Um, because I've stopped buying things for them. So wala silang choice. Wala silang choice except to figure out what to use. Especially now during this pandemic, like we have no toilet paper. So what do they use? It's really tabo and bimpo, right? Um, there is there's no longer any of those like pancake mix, or the ones that they used to cook before, my kids. So now they have to do everything from scratch. We have flour, we have sugar, we buy eggs from the canto. It's all package free, and they can cook, right? So it's really going back to maybe a mentality of, our grandparents lived without producing all of this single-use waste. If they could do it then we can also do it now.
Right. And I guess we can also appeal to Filipino sense of saving, diba? Parang mas mura nga if you just reuse these things or you just make do with what you have at home. So yeah, that's something we can promote to people who want to save also. So I guess moving on from the discussion on creating waste, we also there are also other ways that this pandemic is affecting the environment, right? It's not just the waste we produce, but even just like traffic stopping. I mean, people are saying the air is better in my house. Like I actually see different kinds of birds in the garden. So these are like a little bit of the silver linings that we see in this crisis. But so which leads me to my next question. What in what other ways is this pandemic affecting the planet, and what can we do about it?
I think maybe like the pandemic is sort of just showing us what are essential and what aren't, and then maybe we can figure out like how to go on from here. It's very obvious that like the way forward in order for us all to thrive is self reliance and sustainability, and um, people learning how to you know produce your own food, make your own stuff. Like as Maya mentioned earlier, making things from scratch. Um, that in itself, because like my partner and I do the same thing. We just have like flour, base ingredients, flour, rice, beans, and we make everything from that. Like we grow our own food, even if we live in a condo. Um, the way forward is basically sustainability. Even like coping with the pandemic, imagine going out to the supermarket and then you come home with like cartloads of stuff in single use. Say for example, like bags of chips. Do people still buy chips now? I don't know. Bags of chips, cookies, whatever. Um, you open a bag of chips, you eat it, and that's it. That's done. That's money going down the drain. That's time that you spent like 5 hours lining up at the supermarket, going out and exposing yourself to the virus. But if you get like base materials like potatoes, for example, my partner and I make our own chips at home just by buying potatoes. Um, you just slice them thin, grease a plate, stick it in the microwave for 3 minutes, and you have chips. Um, if you get a bag of flour, for example, a bag of flour will make you X number of loaves of bread. Like for us, that's around 8 loaves of bread, and these are big loaves. Okay, versus if you buy like one bag of bread, which is just like one loaf of bread. Parang it extends the amount of time you spend on making food, producing food, whatever. This extends the space that you have. I mean, everybody's got limited space. Even if you live in a mansion with like a giant pantry, that space is still finite. And supplies from the government, if they're just food per se, this is all like finite unless we learn to grow things and make things and you know cook things from scratch.
Yeah. So
It's
I
like
guess what we can see with what you're saying is this crisis is forcing communities and even entire governments to reconsider how we plan our food security. I mean, just knowing that our processes can be so crippled by a pandemic. Yeah, and then it would be too late if we, start during a pandemic. We have to prepare way in advance. So do any of you have thoughts on how communities can be more food secure for the next pandemic or the next crisis? We can be more independent of, bigger processes that could be affected by other events.
Yes, actually earlier with Oceana, we had our kapihan at Karagatan with Secretary Dar, and he mentioned that they have project that's called Plant, Plant, Plant. And they're actually promoting also urban gardening. So if you check also their page, they're giving out seeds and they're promoting also, I think they have a mini caravan for urban communities so that they can purchase more straight from the farmers then.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's also one thing that I'm noticing now. Um, Communities should really partner with government and move goods. So what I'm seeing in my feed right now on social media is so many of these online gulay, online sellers of vegetables from Benguet, Tarlac, and all of these vegetable producing communities that go direct farm to table. So in the past, I think these farmers have agreements with restaurants and hotels, but now that they don't, they have to appeal to individual consumers like us. There's actually one move by the Department of Trade and Industry. I think yung Bagsakan is somewhere in Taguig. Mm-hmm. So it's DTI who got all of these farm to restaurant agreements because there are no customers. They got all of them together and they're selling them online through they call it the Gulayan ng Bayan. So it's a government initiative partner with online vegetable sellers. So my thinking is, and the vegetables are cheaper than market price, than supermarket prices. So I'm thinking, pandemic or no, if it can be done, why are consumers suffering from all of these jacked up prices in commercial establishments? So if it can be done now, then future moving forward, it should be able we should be able to sustain this even after. No, it's fair trade income for farmers, and for consumers you get fresh vegetables at a lower price, so it's a win-win for everybody eh.
Mm-hmm.
So food security wise, diba? Not just that, you get less waste because it's direct. So you reduce all of those packaging in the supermarket, you reduce all of those, even the price tag is a waste.
Mm-hmm.
And then you reduce the time that you waste, no, in moving these goods. Tapos by the time it gets to the consumer, marami ng bulok, 'di ba? So nababawasan din yung nasasayang.
So you mentioned diba, that we do grocery shopping, and even just the act of going to the grocery, it already creates a lot of waste. And when we go to the grocery, the tool we have with us, we always bring is the grocery bag, right? Like, I mean, people who are more environmentally inclined would bring their own grocery bag that they will reuse again the next time they go to the grocery. But most people, diba, like we talked about earlier, the mindset is let's just use plastic because then we can throw it away and we will be protected from the virus. So what would be your advice to people who want to adopt a more sustainable way of shopping? I mean, what are their fears valid, and can we maybe make it safe for them to go out and use reusable bags, but at the same time it's more environmentally sustainable?
The fears
Let's
are definitely valid. We cannot dismiss those, right? Every person has a different level of fear, of apprehension. We don't dismiss that, but there are alternatives. Like for example, a lot of zero wasters would bring their own container even for meat. No, the ice cream tub or a plastic container, a takeout container. So when you get home, if you're afraid of contamination, when you get home, it's still a reusable plastic container, then that's what you wash with soap and water, right? So these are the alternatives if supermarket is really the only place where you can shop. Now, if you have alternatives, like for example, I found in my community, there's actually a guy who's selling vegetables in a kariton. So I prefer to give him my income rather than the supermarket. I'm so sorry, multinational chains. But so I buy vegetables from him, and you just, I guess you just wash it very well with water. It's no problem. So these are the alternatives if you can find them. No, so we still try and find ways during this pandemic to live with as little waste as possible. It's not about throwing out waste. I'd like to repeat what Monique said. The mindset is that I don't bring waste into my house in the first place.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So right now I'm going to pick up some questions from the Q&A board. So we have attendees who are sending questions to us. So the first one, she's from Cebu City, and she's saying that in Cebu City, they ask for individual households or offices to segregate their trash, or else there will be no pickup. However, when the garbage trucks pick them up, they just dump everything on the truck. Also, they aren't consistent in picking up the garbage, even in the barangay level, so the trash stacks up in the house. So her question is, how do we address this, and who do we talk to, or what can they do about the trash that's piling up in their house?
I think this is really like about like individuals calling the attention of the LGUs or the local, on a barangay level, that this is something that they have to pay attention to. That's actually how my partner and I wound up not uh, not sending waste to landfills at all. Because back then, even when we learned how to segregate, like in 2016, and segregate meaning not just biodegradable, non-biodegradable. This is like, segregating stuff by material, like cartons, glass, cans, and stuff. When we realized that when the trucks came, everything just wound up in the same place anyway, or that the Kalakal people, the Botejario people in our area, they would only select high value materials. We realized that this was something that we had to take into our own hands. Although, like, my partner and I were considered extreme, that's when we just stopped buying all of these materials. We stopped buying canned goods. We stopped buying things in plastic. That way, it really doesn't wind up, there's nothing to pick up from our home in the first place. But it's something that each barangay needs to address. Just like all barangays are, required to have municipal solid waste reclamation facilities, MRFs. But not all barangays have it. In fact, very few barangays actually have this. And so, most people get, parang they feel helpless na I'll segregate, I'll do all of this work, and then it still winds up in the same place anyway. But I think the change really has to come from us. So imagine, I think, the people that pick up the waste, for example, they just do this out of habit. Because, I mean, if you're one house in 100 houses that segregate your waste properly, if the 99 other houses don't, then if I'm the garbage man, parang there's no point for me also to fix it. But if all these 100 households segregate properly, then I think it follows that, parang yung systemic change that we're looking for, it really has to come from us. And we all have to contribute to it. And then we just have to engage our communities, our barangays, so that everybody is on the same page. That way, hindi din sayang yung effort natin.
Okay. Any more responses to that question before I move on to the next?
Yes, this was actually our problem last month because of the lockdown. Our trash got piled up, but since there's Facebook group of a particular barangay, say for example our barangay here in San Mateo, so we just talked directly and posted it on Facebook, and then everyone was like, "Oh, sa amin din, hindi pa sila nagko-collect, sa amin din ganito." So the following day, the barangay captain actually saw it and they responded to it already. It's the barangays that's actually mandated by our RA 9003 or Ecological Solid Waste Management Act. And they should actually collect it, but at source, like what Monique said, you should segregate it already.
Okay, so the next question is from Willie Sentinta Jr. and he's asking, notwithstanding convincing environmental activism among Filipinos, our country is still experiencing a waste problem. Data confirms that LGUs are struggling to implement RA 9003, signed into law 19 years ago. Where are we now after almost 2 decades, and why can't we solve our waste problems?
It's a behavioral problem. I think it's just what we lack really is education, resolve. I mean, because if you're educated enough, if you're aware, and I think most people that have joined the webinar are aware and like woke enough. That's why they're here. You know what to do, and it's actually not all that difficult to do. So most people, I think, just don't know what to do, or like lack the resolve to do it. It's just a matter. Segregation is very easy. It's just a matter of sorting what you have into, what are alike. everything infectious. This is in one spot, like all similar materials are together. And then, if that gets collected from our home that way, then madali lang siya. But like, imagine, yun nga, if we don't do this at home, walang segregation at source, then as it is, like a lot of our tax money already goes into waste management. Um, the as waste gets taken from our home, the amount of work to just sort that, go through all of that, and then put them where they have to go. It's just the amount of work parang just doubles, triples. And so, sorry, I kind of got lost, but like there, um, it's really us. It's lack of education and resolve and accountability.
Mhm. Let me pick up on that. So earlier, Pia, you mentioned diba, and then you pointed out that it's actually more tipid because the concept of zero waste is walang sayang. So the goal is makapagtipid, not just makapagtipid ng goods and all that, pero makapagtipid din ng money, right? So there's actually a question here that I can put together with the waste problem RA. As Monique was saying, it has to be systemic change and it has to come from us. There is this misconception that moving into a zero waste lifestyle is expensive. But that's only because we're looking at the Pinterest view of zero waste, where you have all of these gadgets and all of these items that you are, quote unquote, required to buy. Which is not, right? So when people find out that I live a zero waste life, they automatically think that, oh, I'm going to give you a metal straw. If they think of asking me first, I always refuse because it's like I don't need a straw because we don't need straws, right? So it doesn't have to be expensive, which means it's actually more tipid. For those who are starting, especially for those who are poor, we've actually I've taught a number of friends who to do this. The first thing is to audit everything that you buy. And then, so, for example, my mom's labandera, she comes in every day. I taught her how to do it. And the first thing to do is to audit her entire family's waste and to see ano yung binibili mo na hindi mo kailangan. Right? And then she discovers yung isang anak niya, ang lakas pala sa junk food. So she gives allowance to her kid for school, saan binibili junk food. Hindi napapansin, papiso-piso. 'Di ba? Papiso-piso yung maliliit na ganon. Tapos, so ano yung waste doon? Number one, sinayang mo yung katawan mo kasi asin lang yung kinain mo. No? Sinayang mo yung piso mo, bumili ka lang basically yung asin tsaka ng plastic. No? So, in that sense, she was able to implement with her family better purchase choices. No? So, instead of using money to buy junk, so that's already junk that's reduced. That's already waste that's reduced at source because they refuse to buy it in the first place. No? Second, so when her children began changing merienda choices into, let's say, banana Q na lang, they've also learned to, okay, they go to the banana Q seller, instead of getting pa the stick of the banana Q, they've learned to bring a plate. Pakidiretso na po sa plato, tapos iuwi sa bahay, and they eat it with a fork. So they reduce that stick as well, even if it's compostable waste, right? So these are very little changes that can be done, but it does need education. We do need awareness. But if you can imagine 1,000 people in a single community doing exactly the same thing, that's where systemic change will start to happen.
Mm-hmm.
I'll also go off on what Maya said about the term tipid. Yun nga, there's that misconception that zero waste is, I guess it's because it's called the zero waste lifestyle online. And us Pinoys, when we think lifestyle, it's like a trend or like fashion or something.
Social.
It's not. I want to kind of maybe change that phrase and make it more of like the zero waste way of life or the zero waste mentality, where actually the tenets are very, yun, walang sayang. The like Pinoy culture is actually very zero waste in nature if we look back like a few generations, I guess, ahead of us. We have things like, yun nga, walang sayang, tipid, what else? There's another word that's very zero waste, simot. Even if you have like a can of something, we don't eat canned goods, but if you have canned goods, you scrape off the contents with a spatula and dump that on your plate. That's extra food. For example, people that usually buy toothpaste. My partner and I don't buy toothpaste. We make our own tooth powders. But if you buy toothpaste, for example, all you have to do is cut that open when you think you're completely done with it and you've squeezed the life out of it. You cut that open, there's actually still like a whole bunch of it inside, right? So, and then you can stuff that into your jar or your bottle, and because it's residual waste, you can't recycle that. So simot. We have so many Pinoy things that are very zero waste. As mentioned earlier, there's the tabo. Back then, there's the pasador. Um, a lot of females, I think, or a lot of women, a lot of people who menstruate during this time uh, find it hard to, that's one other essential or one other personal need that you have to go out for and buy. Why not use the quarantine as a time to maybe experiment with either reusable alternatives? Um, if you can start sewing your own reusable cloth pads at home, that would be great. If you really don't know how to sew, there are like online sources for you to be able to procure these and like buy them, but you don't necessarily have to buy stuff. All you need are like cotton towels, just sew them up. Nobody's gonna see you anyway. You're not gonna be going out and going to the office or anything. Might as well just use these things at home.
Mhm.
As Maya mentioned earlier, like tissue paper, we haven't used any kind of tissue paper, paper towels, or toilet paper in years because we just have cut up old cotton shirts that we use in place of wipes, handkerchiefs. If you're sick or if you have somebody at home that has the virus, if you have several old shirts that you can cut up, you can just use that once and then stick it in the hamper. Disinfect that right away in like a bucket of water and soap.
Mhm.
And you won't have to contribute to the carbon emissions involved in paper production, especially disposable paper. Most of the time, these things also come in plastic packaging, and that's more waste of you. That's more, sorry, these are more things that you pay for with your money that you have to go out for and endanger your own like health and safety. Um, and at the same time, this is more waste of you to dispose of, which also endangers our frontliners. At the moment, we are disposing around 44,000 tons of municipal solid waste daily in the Philippines for like, I think 2020. And imagine if you have like just one, just in, infected pieces of tissue paper that's mixed into that like pool of waste, then that just, I don't know, it'll just cause new surges in
Right.
outbreaks, or it's just a hazard,
Mm.
versus if we just prevented all that from happening by having self-contained reusable stuff.
So actually, this related to a question from Angela Aquino. So she's asking, given that this pandemic, private citizens are creating themselves possibly hazardous and infectious waste. She's asking, what are the changes you think that should be done to the Philippine solid waste management system, even our laws, so that we can manage these kinds of wastes given COVID-19 and possibly other diseases in the future? Do we have to tweak our laws or maybe add another segregation category when we segregate our waste at home? And what other ways can we protect not just the garbage collectors but the community, everyone else?
Maya already mentioned earlier that if it's infectious waste, if you have somebody at home who's sick, everything that's from there that was used, whether they were like gloves, masks, or whatever, they have to be in a separate sealed container, ideally that's transparent, that way people won't open it and release whatever's in it. But like I think that's basically it. We just have to add like actually that already exists in like proper segregation, like hazardous, infectious waste. That's always been separate. Like yun nga, we all just need to be educated on this so that we don't just dump everything together and like mix everything that's infectious and non-infectious. But like these are already in place. In fact, we're lauded by other countries for having lots of really good environmental laws. Like we have some of the best in the world, including the no burn law, where we're not supposed to incinerate stuff.
But they're
It's
really
really
not
just,
implemented.
yes, they're really
They're
just
just burning
not
everywhere.
properly implemented. And this is also because a lot of the people that, well, even the officials, the people that collect the waste, and the people that produce the waste are not aware of what these laws are, or what I don't know, the consequences are, and the benefits and
Mm.
of doing
But
it.
even the way the garbage collection is done, like I see in my village when the garbage truck comes over, the garbage collectors aren't wearing any protective equipment. They're just wearing their shorts. Sometimes they're even topless. I mean, obviously maybe it's also the garbage truck companies who don't protect their own employees, or maybe it's something we should institutionalize, that if we have a if local governments hire or contract a certain company to do the collection, there should be standards. Like these collectors should be well protected when they go on their job, and if they violate that, then the contract should be off kagad, and the contract be given to another company. So in your villages, do you see are the garbage collectors there wearing protective equipment? And what kind of equipment, or what other ways can we protect these frontliners?
Yeah, actually, if I'm not mistaken, I think I saw a Facebook post from DILG, and they're appealing to the LGUs to provide PPEs for the garbage collectors. Actually, also from my experiences last week, we handed masks to our garbage collectors. So for people here who are listening, and if you have extra masks or face shields, maybe you could donate some to our garbage collectors. Also, I'd like to add, earlier you mentioned about the laws. I think I'd quote our vice president, who's actually an environmental lawyer, and she says na, we have good laws. It's just the implementation. So, for example, the education part in the RA 9003, it says there that CHED and DepEd should include in the curriculum the solid waste management. Also, it's almost 19 years since the implementation of 9003, pero wala pa rin tayo no non-environmentally acceptable products and packaging. And the commission is mandated to do that a year after. But until now, wala pa rin tayo nun. And they should have included single-use plastics in that mandate. And now they're actually, what they have for that is the life cycle analysis saying that paper is more sustainable than plastic. So that's for Oceana. We're in for the full implementation of RA 9003.
Colleen, for the benefit of our attendees, how do we donate to your initiative of collecting equipment for garbage collectors?
We actually have extra masks at our household. So every time they go here, they're scheduled to go in our village during Tuesdays. So we handed it to them.
But is this an Oceana initiative? Is it
No,
a way for people?
it's personal,
Okay.
family.
But yeah, we should all do that, no? Like if we see Kuya, diba, who's coming over to get your garbage, why not just hand over like extra masks you have, right? And
yes.
gloves, or maybe I don't know,
Gloves
food
also.
you have.
Hopefully reusable.
Yes.
Reusable stuff, because then they'll just add to the waste that also, gets hauled out. So there.
Okay, so we will be asking maybe one more question since it's already 3:57. So sige, if anyone has any insights on, for example, community-based initiatives on how maybe villages or barangays are dealing with reducing their waste. Like for example, in our village, we have a community market where, it's just vegetables on a table and there's not much packaging. You have to bring your own grocery bag or your own sustainable bag and packaging. Are there any other initiatives that you think should be scaled up? Any good practices that you've been observing other people do at this time?
Urban farming. Sorry, my bias is really with urban farming. Anybody that has a backyard, anybody that has a lawn, we don't live in the 18th century anymore. We should be growing food and not lawn. Lawns actually came about back then as a display of, like, parang you were higher up in society if you had a lawn, because you were showing people how much space you could waste.
Monique, baka we can ask you what kinds of vegetables are the easiest to grow in your backyard, especially given it's summer season. I mean, what's the most it's gonna grow for sure, even if you're not a green thumb.
Okay, first let me dispel this whole green thumb, black thumb thing. That's actually a myth. So every chance I get, I say that. That's a myth. With gardening, there's just experience and inexperience and the desire to learn more. And now that we're in the information age, everything is available on Google. There are communities on Facebook as well. For example, like the Facebook group that we run for urban farming, it's called Manila Grows Food. So people can join that. People can learn. So there's no green thumb, no black thumb. It's just a matter of people trying stuff out, and then if stuff fails, you just keep trying again. Say if you don't and you deem yourself a black thumb, you really won't learn to grow anything, because you stop trying. It's the same as any skill. So, and then aside from the green thumb, black thumb, if you want to get started at home, the easiest things to grow will be leafy greens and herbs. Why? This is a generalization. This does not apply to like everything, but it's a good place to start. Leafy greens, kasi all the plant has to produce is leaves, right? So it just needs like at least 3 hours of sun and some water, and it'll grow, right? Versus if you try to grow something fruiting, because a lot of beginner gardeners want to start out with tomatoes. And I know from experience that tomatoes are not the easiest things to grow. In fact, they're quite they're for intermediate people who have a bit of experience na. I mean, go ahead if you want to try tomatoes. go ahead. I'm just saying, like, you might get your heart broken, but don't let that stop you from trying. That's how I learned. So start with leafy greens. In fact, if you have a backyard of your own, you can forage for stuff. Like, there are a lot of things that we have growing that look like weeds that are actually considered weeds. That turns out they're edible pala. So, for example, there's pansitan. You can Google that. On Manila Grows Food, we have discussions on edible weeds, so you can also check those out. There's local spinach. It's called kulitis. It doesn't look like the spinach that we see at the market, but like if you spot it in your backyard, you can propagate it and make more of it, right? So you can eat that. You can also grow stuff from food scraps.
Mm.
Okay, don't do carrots. Those viral videos that you see online about regrowing carrots from the stump, that's not true. Those are just manufactured by social media accounts. You can't. You have to grow carrots from seed if you want carrots. If, if you grow them from the carrot heads, all you'll get are the greens, which is okay naman because you can eat those. What else? The easiest where you'll likely be able to get it to survive are green onions. So green onions are super easy. Um, you just have to, like, if it's like this, just leave about a third of it, or leave like the bottom 3 or 4 inches of it, and then stick that in the ground and water it right away.
Mm.
Um, so there's also basil. Basil is very easy to propagate. Um, my partner and I actually subsist mostly on just the food that we grow now, because like he and I eat plant based also, because there's a lot of waste involved in the animal agriculture industry that we refuse to contribute to. Um, so um, basically, just eating vegetables and planting things that'll sort of that you'll ROI on fast. That's the way to go. You just do things like basil, green onions, spinach, kale if you can get like a packet of seeds. Groceries have these swivel things where you can get seeds.
Mm.
So on Manila Grows Food, we also have this thread where we collated all of the suppliers for agriculture stuff, like for gardening stuff, that are open during the ECQ. So they will ship to your home no matter where you are. So yun. And then there are initiatives also from there are government initiatives also, like if you get, I think, from the Department of Agriculture, basta, there are LGUs also that provide like seed packets for easy greens like pechay, kangkong. These are very easy to grow. There's also okra and eggplant. Eggplants are great because um, they can live for like 2 years. So my partner and I, we have 3 eggplant trees, and we haven't had to buy eggplants at all from the supermarkets for some time now, like for a year.
Mm.
And they're all just
Okay, wow.
planted in pots. Lunggay, mongo, those are also easy.
So I guess the challenge for everyone in this webinar is that by April 30, we all have our little forests of green onion and basil so that we can, be sustainable and self-reliant when the next emergency hits, right? We don't know when that will be. So it's already 4:05. So I think we covered a lot. I mean, we covered single-use plastics, minimizing our impact on the environment during the pandemic, and how to be more reliant with our food security. So uh, I'm really sorry that we can't answer all the questions. There's a list here that just came in. But yeah, I think that this has been a really interesting discussion, and I hope that our participants can take a little bit from what we discussed and implement it in their own lives. I mean, personally, I would suggest that everyone in the panelists, I hope you guys make some ebook as a reference for what you do, like especially planting vegetables and making having implements or reusable items, making your own reusable masks. If this can be scaled up and spread to people through resources like ebooks, about it's easier to absorb this kind of knowledge if you have it in front of you. But yeah, so we'd like to thank everyone for being part of this webinar, especially for our panelists for sharing their knowledge and their insights. Thank you to everyone who sent in their questions and their comments in the chat group. We like to keep this alive, even if not all of us can, grab the mic and talk on the video chat. We see a very healthy discussion unraveling in the chat column on the right side. So with that, thank you everyone. It was my pleasure to host and moderate this discussion. And again, hopefully we can all learn something from this webinar.